Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel for the final video of Mystery History Week. Today we've got a strange, sad case to discuss with an unsolved cipher. Some of the strangest cases I cover always seem to have some kind of weird code, note or cipher attached, and this one is no different. This cipher is actually so baffling that it's actually one of the FBI's Cryptanalysis and Racketeering Records Unit, the CRU's, top 2 unsolved cases. This case is that of a 41-year-old man called Ricky McCormick, whose body was discovered in a cornfield in St. Charles County in Missouri on June 30th, 1999. He had last been seen just 3 days earlier at the Amoco gas station where he worked part-time, and there have been no calls to the police by family members or friends at any point in those 3 days to report him missing, no frantic calls to his own phone number to find out where he was. Simply, no one had realised he was missing for those 3 days, until a woman driving past the cornfield spots his body lying face down. When the police arrived at the scene, they would have been forgiven for thinking the body had been there for a number of months. It was inexplicably, incredibly decomposed, so badly that his fingertips had actually fallen off and were laying next to his body. And it was these fingertips that were later used to identify the body. Ricky was a pretty small and slender man anyway. He was just 5'6" tall and was described by people as scrawny. He was found in filthy blue jeans and a stained white t-shirt, or what was left of him was found wearing that anyway. What actually remained was just described as 72 pounds of flesh and bone. Somehow in just 3 days his body had decomposed beyond recognition. And we're not talking about somewhere that was hugely hot and humid either. In the 3 days between the time that he was last seen and the discovery of his body, the weather in Missouri would have been a maximum about 26 degrees Celsius, which is about 78 degrees Fahrenheit. That's just a standard summer day. That isn't hot enough to cause the level of decomposition that we saw with Ricky's body. Due to this, investigators suspected that Ricky may have been killed elsewhere and his body kept in an outbuilding or vehicle trunk somewhere metal that held in a huge amount of heat before he was eventually dumped in the cornfield to be found, and he likely would be found very soon after he was dumped. Another thing which pushed the police to this conclusion is that Ricky was actually found 20 miles from where he lived. At the time of his death, he was actually living with his girlfriend Sandra Jones in a housing project in downtown St. Louis. He didn't drive and there was no public transport to this particular place where he was found. There was no way that Ricky could have got to this random cornfield in the middle of nowhere of his own accord. Seeing as the body was already so decomposed by the time it was found, the autopsy and toxicology exams were complicated to say the least, and the medical examiner classified Ricky's cause of death as undetermined. They just couldn't figure it out. Regardless, the authorities now consider this case to be a homicide. Foul play was definitely involved. At the time, it was marked as suspicious. In 1999, a Maryland Heights police officer told the local newspaper, "We've worked every lead and not only can we not prove it's a homicide, we can't even come up with a motive for this guy to be dead." And it's worth noting that Ricky was not a healthy man, nor was he a good man. He suffered with chronic heart and lung problems, asthma and chest pains from when he was a child, and it's been reported that he'd been experiencing chest pains and shortage of breath just the week before his death, bad enough that he'd taken himself to the ER. But he'd smoked at least a pack of cigarettes a day since he was just 10 years old, and on any typical day drank more than 20 caffeinated drinks. So he didn't really help himself, but his family insists that he didn't drink alcohol, nor did he do illegal drugs. Ricky was kept in the hospital for 2 days before being released on June 24th, being ordered to return for a follow-up the following week. They ruled out a heart attack, but his illness was bad enough that he was reportedly claiming disability benefits for his chronic heart problems alongside the part-time job he worked at the gas station. The day after he was released from the hospital, he goes back to the hospital, complaining once again that he was having trouble breathing. This time he wasn't admitted though, and he was released later that evening. Now, like I said, at the time of his death, he worked at a gas station, but he'd actually worked a number of different jobs over his time. His Aunt Gloria said that she called him vampire, as he slept all day and then rose at night, much preferring to work the graveyard shift to daytime work. It was at this gas station that he worked that he was last seen, an employee saying that they saw Ricky there on the 27th of June. Medical examiners are sure that he died later that very same day. Now, I said that Ricky wasn't particularly a good man either, and in 1993 Ricky served time in prison for a felony conviction of first-degree sexual assault. He'd had 4 children with 3 different women, and it doesn't seem like he had much to do with any of his children. In November 1992, then 32-year-old Ricky was arrested for having fathered 2 children with a girl who was younger than 14 years old. Her identity was protected by the court, and she was known by Ricky's family by the nickname Pretty Baby. Ricky had been sleeping with this girl since she was just 11 years old. He was a paedophile. In 1993, he pled guilty to the crime and would go on to serve a year in prison, getting sent home early on conditional release. Before trial, Ricky's public defender noted that she had reason to believe that he was suffering from some kind of mental disease or defect, and requested that the judge ordered a mental health exam. Ricky was indeed evaluated by a local psychologist who found Ricky to be fit for trial. But it's worth noting that he may well have had some mental illnesses. His own mother, and this is a direct quote from her, described her son as retarded. Not a word we use now, but that's his own mother. His cousin said that Ricky would often talk like he was in another world, and suspected that Ricky may have suffered with schizophrenia or bipolar disorder. He did go see a psychiatrist at some point who said that Ricky had a brick wall in his mind and that he refused to break that wall. Even as a young boy, his family said that he would display unusual behaviour, unable to make friends and standing by himself at break time. He merely scraped through school, but he was hardly able to read or write when he eventually dropped out. He was entirely illiterate. He was barely able to write his own name. As far as I'm aware, he was never diagnosed with any kind of learning disability or dyslexia, but this may well have been the case. But what he lacked in academics, he apparently made up for in street smarts. He knew how to survive in the streets, and he definitely had a bit of a reputation. At the time of his death, he was known by police in the area for dealing drugs or running drugs for a small local drug ring. In the year he died, he'd made 2 brief trips to Florida by Greyhound coach. He stayed at the Econo Lodge in Orlando, and whilst he was there, him and his girlfriend, Sandra Jones, made a number of phone calls between one another, as well as one phone call to the gas station where he worked. Sandra would later tell police that she suspected Ricky had gone to Florida to pick up drugs, likely marijuana. He would often pick up and deliver drugs for money, but Sandra said that on this last trip, he came back different. He seemed scared of something. Is it likely that he knew he was in trouble for something? Is this why he was insistent on getting himself admitted into hospital, which he would have seen as a safe space? As far as we're aware, he didn't actually talk to anyone about any issues he was having. The girlfriend seemed to think that Ricky was taking these trips to pick up marijuana for his boss at the gas station, Baha Hamdillah, known as Bob. When Ricky's body is found, the police search his pockets for any information that could help them identify him. They talked to his friends, family and girlfriend to try and figure out what could have happened, who could have murdered him. But with his background, it's likely that Ricky did have many enemies, many people out there who wanted to hurt him. Nothing helped police get any closer in finding an answer to this case. And it's worth just reiterating here that the police were sure that he'd been murdered. This wasn't a death by natural causes. This wasn't because of his heart problems or breathing. He was found in a field in the middle of nowhere that he had no means of getting to, and he was very, very decomposed. He hadn't been kept in that field for 3 days. He'd been somewhere else. So the case just goes cold, but it remained open. It's open to this very day. For 12 years, there's nothing in this case. Until March 2011, when the FBI's Cryptanalysis and Racketeering Records Unit, the CRRU, share something big. They share that 2 notes have been found crumpled in Ricky's jean pocket, a vital piece of information that they'd never released before, not even to Ricky's family. Ricky's family had no idea about this. But these weren't just normal notes. They were written in an unknown code, a jumble of letters and occasionally numbers set off with parentheses. The notes contained over 30 lines of coded text that the FBI had been working on for 12 years, and they still had absolutely no idea what it meant. Dan Olson, the chief of the CRU, explained, "It doesn't happen often that we have an unsolved cipher of this length and significance. The characters are not random. There are many E's, for example, that could be used as a spacer. There are many characteristics that suggest it could be solved, many patterns. The problem is, we don't know why it's not solvable." They feel that solving the note could help solve Ricky's murder. You know that it's a complicated cipher when the FBI have to admit defeat and go to the public begging for help. There's literally a page on the FBI website where you can enter your details and enter your information on how to break this code. A fresh set of eyes in this case could really make all the difference. There's actually another quote from Dan Olson that did actually make me laugh a bit. It's, "We're really good at what we do, but we could use some help with this one." As of today, the code still has not been solved, but the FBI are insistent that it's not random. This code has to mean something. So what are our options here? Well, it's either one of two things. Either Ricky wrote the cipher himself or someone else wrote it, either the murderer or it was a note that Ricky was supposed to pass on to someone else, possibly as part of a drug deal. Could Ricky really have written this code himself? I mean, as I mentioned earlier, he was illiterate. He could barely scrawl his own name. Sources do give opposing views from family members. Some say that they never knew Ricky to write in code and that they only ever saw him scribble down complete nonsense, never fully formed letters. His own mother said that he didn't write in code. However, other reports say that Ricky was known to write in codes from when he was a young boy. To be honest, I'm more inclined to believe the direct quote from his mother though, saying that he never wrote codes. But there are no surviving handwriting samples from Ricky either to compare to the note. And Dan Olson says that he has every confidence that Ricky wrote the notes himself. He seems to think that part of the note may actually be a to-do list. Did Ricky teach himself his own language, how to write in a way that only he could understand? Maybe there was no rhyme or reason to it, but just something that Ricky could understand, a kind of shorthand form of writing that made sense in his head. If that's the case and it is just random, something that would only make sense to Ricky, it's unlikely they'll ever be able to solve this code if there's no key to it. I actually saw a comparison on Reddit to Charlie Day from Always Sunny, which I thought was a great comparison to make here. If you've never watched It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, then Charlie Day is an illiterate character. He's always trying to write notes and the rest of the gang can never understand what he's trying to communicate. It's just his own random shorthand form of writing. It makes sense to him, but not to anyone else. And I think there's a good chance that this could be the case here. But it's odd if no family member ever reported him doing this before, which does make it unlikely. Plus the notes, I thought, are generally quite neat. The letters are distinguishable and the lines are fairly straight. It looks like it's kind of written in paragraphs. According to his mother, Ricky's attempt at writing was always just scribbling. I don't know enough / anything about ciphers to even attempt to understand this code. To me, it literally looks like a jumble of letters, the jumble of letters that it is. One page does have P1 circled in the top right hand corner, which you can take to probably mean that is the first page. Other than that, I'm clueless. According to the FBI, in order to solve a cipher, there's 4 basic steps you have to do. First, you determine the language, which in this case is English. Then you determine the system used, you reconstruct the key, and then you reconstruct the plain text. The FBI have never got past step 2 with Ricky's cipher. There's a chance that if this code is ever solved, it could literally just be a to-do list or a shopping list, nothing whatsoever to do with the murder. But if it happens to be a note that was given to him by someone else, or he was expected to be couriering this note, then this may hold some very important answers as to who killed him and why. Perhaps the note is a red herring, a jumble of random letters enough to distract the police from looking for the actual killer, and instead focus on solving the note. If that's the case, it seemed like it worked. But it's unlikely that Ricky was involved with the kind of people who would go to the effort to do that. I mean, most of the evidence points to his murderer most likely being involved with drug dealing, or maybe a drug deal gone wrong. It's unlikely that whoever did this would think enough to write a random cipher and put it in his pocket to distract the police. The area in which Ricky's body was found is actually an area that's really well known for being a body dumping ground. In 1995, authorities discovered the bodies of 2 sex workers along that same stretch of road. 2 years after Ricky, in 2001, the nude bodies of 2 more women were found about 300 yards away from where he'd been found. As far as I can find, the murderers of these women have never been apprehended either, although I will admit that I could find little information about their cases. Is it the same person dumping all of these bodies, or is it just a convenient place, an abandoned cornfield in the middle of nowhere, inaccessible by public transport? There were a few suspicious people in Ricky's life who the police kind of suspected from the beginning. There was his gas station boss, Baha Hamdallah, and his brother, Juma Hamdallah. Ricky's girlfriend seemed to think that Ricky was a drug runner for them, as it's known that the two were dodgy figures. Just 2 months after Ricky's death, Juma allegedly shot Baha, his own brother, although no charges were filed. Baha is reported to be a violent man and in possession of several weapons. Violence seemed to follow him wherever he went, and he does seem to be the most likely person to harm Ricky. He was very involved in his life. But there's also a man called Gregory Knox, who was a major drug dealer who operated in the housing complex in which Ricky lived. Gregory was a suspect in several homicides and at least 2 murder-for-hire schemes. It's not clear to me if Ricky worked with Gregory as well as Baha, but it is an interesting connection. Eventually both men ended up in prison, Gregory for possession and drug trafficking and Baha for first-degree murder. Even if neither of them had anything to do with Ricky's death, it gives you an idea of the kind of world that Ricky was involved in. Why and how he died remains a mystery, along with the cipher. It will probably remain a mystery until the cipher is eventually solved, if it ever is. Olsen says that he remains confident that one day someone will crack the code and the case will be solved. Like I said, I'm not the kind of person to understand codes. My brain can't even work out anagrams. I suck at Scrabble. But I know there are thousands of people out there who are brilliant at this kind of thing. If you're a code solver, have a look, give it a go, you never know. In the description down below, I'll link a good quality version of the cipher and I'll link all of my sources for this case as well. Have a look, they might give you a better understanding of the cipher and what people are kind of looking at, what angle they're taking looking at this. If I'm being honest, I do think that this cipher wasn't written by Ricky. I think it was probably given to him as part of sort of like a drug courier deal, that he was meant to be sort of like giving this note to somebody else. I don't really think he could have written it. If his writing was just scribbles, I do think these notes are quite neatly written. But you never know, it may well have been him, and I'm really intrigued to see what all of you think about this case. And with that, that's the end of my week of videos. I've posted a video every single day for the last 7 days. I have another video coming up on Sunday, and there will be no mystery next Wednesday as I try and get back into my schedule. It'll be regularly scheduled programming from I think the 13th of November. Thank you so much for watching my videos. Thank you so much for supporting my channel. If you do like what I'm doing here, then make sure you click that subscribe button and click the bell notification as well, so you'll get a notification every single time I upload. Or if you don't want to do that, I upload at 4:30 PM every single Wednesday and other random days as well, so keep checking back. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye guys.